But we're back in our Heroes of the Faith series today. Today we're going to be looking at Moses. And really when we talk about Moses, Moses covers the remainder of what's called the Torah or the Pentateuch. This is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. So when you read the New Testament and Jesus talks about the law in the Gospels, he often refers to the law and the prophets. The law is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Torah or the Pentateuch. Now, Torah is a Hebrew word coming from this idea of to instruct, of teaching a faithful, lawful life. Pentateuch is a Greek word. And it helps a lot if we break down the word to help understand what it means. So if you break down Pentateuch, penta, of course, means 5. Pentagon, for example, is a 5-sided figure. The Pentagon outside of Washington, D.C. is a giant 5-sided building. They named it the Pentagon because it's shaped like a pentagon. It's not just a clever name. A toque is a winter hat. It's more of a Canadian or northern states term. So Pentateuch, of course, means 5 hats. Does that sound right? 5 hats for Pentateuch? No, that doesn't. See, that was a lot funnier in my head when I came up with that the other day. Pentateuch, touk or toikos, the Greek word in this context, means a book or a scroll. So penta means 5, touk means books, Pentateuch means 5 books. There's your Jeopardy question for the week. Let's move on. So Moses' story here starts at the beginning of Exodus, the beginning of the book of Exodus. And we spent a few weeks here talking about the heroes of the faith in Genesis. We've had Abel and Enoch and Noah and Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph. And now we're up to Moses. And with Moses, we start in Exodus, then we go through Leviticus and Numbers and finally Deuteronomy, where we read about Moses' death and the passing on of his leadership to the Israelites, the passing on of his leadership of the Israelites to Joshua. So in talking about Moses, we have 4 Old Testament books to cover this morning. Piece of cake. All right. But we're going to kind of follow the outline that the author of Hebrews talks about here in his letter. We start with chapter 11, verse 23. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. So first thing that's pointed out here is not so much the faith of Moses, it's the faith of Moses' parents here. They hide him, we read that they hide him for 3 months after he's born. But if you just read Hebrews, it doesn't tell you why they had to hide him. So let's look at that. Why do they have to hide Moses? Well, do you guys remember a couple weeks ago we talked about Joseph, right? When Joseph was in charge of Egypt. So Joseph is in Egypt, Pharaoh has a dream, and Joseph interprets that dream to mean that there's going to be years of great abundance, followed by years of great famine. And Joseph is put in charge of all of Egypt. And when he's in charge of all of Egypt, he says, okay, during these years of abundance, we are going to put a bunch of food and grain and whatever we need away so that we have something when that famine comes. And because of this leadership, because of this plan, the people of Egypt were saved during this great famine. And as word spread around the region, people from all over started to come to Egypt because they had food, because they had what they needed. And they thought, well, maybe we can go get some food from Egypt instead of starving to death, which is a great idea. So among the people that come to Egypt are Joseph's brothers. Do you remember what Joseph's brothers did to him? They sold him into slavery. And his brothers are now coming. They don't recognize him at first. Of course, he recognizes them, and there's a whole back and forth you can read about in Genesis. But that's what brought Joseph's brothers into Egypt. And immediately after this, we have all of Jacob's family living in Egypt. All the Israelites are here in Egypt, and everybody's all happy and as happy as they can be, I guess. Well, the Israelites, after Joseph and all of his brothers died, they continue to be fruitful. They grow in number. But when a new king comes to power, Joseph and what Joseph did for the Egyptians, this new king, this new Pharaoh just didn't pay attention to it. He forgot about it. Joseph and what he did meant nothing to the new king, and he saw the Israelites as a threat. So he enslaves the Israelites. This new king issues a decree that all Hebrew boys born must be killed immediately. The girls could live, but the boys must be killed. Does that sound familiar to us at all? Maybe the massacre of the innocents from Matthew's gospel that we read about when Jesus was born that Herod issues. There's a lot of connections between the Old and New Testaments that we need to make sure we're looking at and understanding. So the Egyptian Pharaoh decrees that all Hebrew boys born must be killed. But in Exodus, we're going to be looking a lot at Exodus. So if you have your Bible with you, open up to Exodus, if you would. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Moses here, I have the New International Version. That's my translation that I use. Here he's described as a fine child. Other translations may say beautiful or handsome. And there's a couple questions we need to ask here. Number one is there something inherently special suggested in saying that Moses was, quote, a fine child? The second question to ask, is this an extraordinary thing to do for Moses' mother to hide him so he wouldn't be killed? So that first question, is there something extra special about Moses? Now, the author of Hebrews certainly indicates that there is, that his parents saw something special in him. Here in Exodus, this just kind of seems like a way to describe Moses. His mother finds him beautiful. His mother finds him fine. His mother finds him handsome. I also want you to keep in mind the authorship of Exodus and all of the Torah, all of the Pentateuch, is ascribed to Moses. So as Moses is writing this, he's describing himself, right? I mean, if I was writing about my own birth, oh, that Mike, he was such a handsome little man. And nobody would believe me. I found a picture of myself. After my dad passed away, I got all of our family photos, and I was looking through one of the picture albums one day, and there's a picture of me as a toddler. I was Chris Farley. I'm not kidding. I got to find that picture again. It was just had that look on I was absolutely Chris Farley. It was awesome. But Moses is writing this. Moses says his parents saw Moses as a fine child. But if you do know the rest of the story of Moses, which we're going to talk about in chunks today, of course, if you know the rest of the story, you do know that Moses is very special. You do know that he is very special. So what about my second question? Is it an extraordinary thing for Moses' mother to hide him so he wouldn't be killed? Well, not necessarily. Chances are that other Hebrew mothers are doing the same thing. They're hiding their sons so they won't be killed. It's a pretty natural reaction to not want your child killed. I mean, it just is. It's a natural thing for you to do. But Exodus doesn't say that other children were being hidden, only that Moses was hidden. And we can't make an argument from silence, okay? So the only thing that we can say for sure is that Moses was hidden for 3 months. Chances are a lot of other baby boys were as well, but we know for sure that Moses was hidden for 3 months. And in this act, we see the faithfulness of Moses' parents. Imagine what could have happened to his parents. Pharaoh has decreed that all Hebrew boys born must be killed. And Moses' parents defy that edict because they know they must. A Pharaoh willing to murder babies. Who knows what that man is capable of? So for 3 months, Moses is hidden by his parents. But after that, it likely becomes too difficult for his parents to keep him hidden from the Egyptians. With that, Mom puts Moses in a basket and places him, as Exodus tells us, among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Pharaoh's daughter goes down to the river to take a bath, and there she sees cute little baby Moses in the basket. And what's really neat about this story is that with all these actions taken, Moses becomes Pharaoh's daughter's son. But it just so happened that it's like God had all this planned out or something when we read this. Because Moses' older sister is with Pharaoh's daughter at that moment. It reads in Exodus, she is one of the attendants of Pharaoh's daughter. So Pharaoh's daughter, she remains unnamed in Exodus, by the way. So I'm going to keep referring to her as Pharaoh's daughter. Other traditions give her some different names. Batya, Bethia, Thermothis, I can't even say that one. Maris, that's a little easier to say. These are some later Jewish and Christian associations. It's also been suggested that this Pharaoh's daughter is the Egyptian princess Hatshepsut. Man, why did I even put all these names in here? Jeez. I'm supposed to have you guys read the hard names during that. I'm supposed to make it easy. Hatshepsut is the Egyptian princess that's believed that this is the Pharaoh's daughter that we're talking about. So whatever it is, whatever her name is, she isn't named in Exodus. So I'll just keep referring to her as Pharaoh's daughter. So Moses' older sister is an attendant with Pharaoh's daughter when she goes down to take a bath, and she discovers cute little baby Moses in a basket among the reeds of the Nile River. Pharaoh's daughter recognizes that Moses is a Hebrew, and it is Moses' sister who suggests, "Shall I go out and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" That's Exodus 2:7. And guess who she finds to take care of little baby Moses? Moses' mommy! What a coincidence! How convenient! Yes! You think that was part of God's plan? Absolutely. Now, Moses is actually not named yet. This comes a little bit later. But Moses' mom gets to raise him till he's probably 3 or 4 years old. And that's when Pharaoh's daughter comes back and takes him back, and that's when he's officially named Moses. So now Moses is the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He grows up, though, knowing he is a Hebrew, but he still has all these benefits of Egyptian royalty. So Moses grows up. Moses grows up, and one day he sees an Egyptian mistreating. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. As Exodus puts it, one of his own people. And Moses reacts by killing and then hiding the Egyptian's body, saving that Hebrew from the beating that they were receiving. Now, in this action, Moses is effectively renouncing his Egyptianness, Egyptianhood. I don't know what the word would be there. He renounces all the stuff, all the good stuff that he's got. He is no longer Egyptian, he is now fully Hebrew. After he kills the Egyptian, Pharaoh finds out and tries to have Moses killed. And at this point, Moses flees to Midian. And while in Midian, we have our very famous story of the burning bush. God speaks to Moses through this burning bush. That's chapter 3 of Exodus. I highly recommend that you read that if you get the chance. And we get to this point where we're back in Hebrews now, back in Hebrews 11. And our author of Hebrews says this: "By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible." So this is really everything that has happened here. Moses chooses to leave his life of privilege behind. He chooses to live with his fellow Hebrews, who at this point are enslaved by the Egyptians. And he does this because the promise of God is that of a far greater life. The promise of God is a far greater existence in the life to come. Well, eventually Moses comes back to Egypt. As soon as Moses gets back to Egypt, he and his brother Aaron, I'll say they start to cause problems for Pharaoh. And Pharaoh responds by causing more problems for the Hebrews. And there's this back and forth between Moses and Pharaoh, and then Charlton Heston shows up and says, "Let my people go," right? And there's something about Soylent Green. I don't know, maybe I'm mixing up some movies here. Soylent Green's another Charlton Heston movie. Okay, we'll talk about that later. So now the plagues descend on Egypt. We have these plagues that descend on Egypt, but Pharaoh's heart is hard, and he will not let the Hebrews leave. And Charlton Heston keeps coming back saying, "Let my people go," again and again, and the plagues keep coming. What are these plagues? There's so many plagues. There's blood. The Nile turns to blood. There are frogs and there are gnats, gross little gnats. You ever hate those little gnats that are flying around your head? There are flies and there's pestilence. There are boils. People and animals are covered in boils. And there's this incredible thunderstorm with this hail that just destroys all the crops and kills animals. And there are locusts, a plague of locusts. Then there's darkness, 3 days of darkness. And finally comes the death of the firstborn, everything. God tells Moses this plan. Now that last plague, the death of the firstborn, everything, this originally is going to include the Hebrews, the Israelites as well. But to distinguish Israelite from Egyptian, the Israelites need to do something. They need to sacrifice a lamb. And they need to take some of the blood and paint the doorframe of their house with it. That way, when the Lord comes through to end the life of the firstborn everything, he will see the blood on that house. And he will spare everyone in that household. He will pass over that house, and no one will face death. This is the start of the tradition of Passover. If you would like to learn more about Passover, consult the Metallica song Creeping Death from their 1984 release, Ride the Lightning. Seriously, check it out. Back in Hebrews now. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea as on dry land, but when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. With all this death and destruction, Pharaoh finally relents and lets the Israelites leave Egypt. So they set out for the area by the Red Sea. Now here's a little aside for you. The majority of English translations do say Red Sea here. And if you have a New International Version, as I do, back in Exodus chapter 13, verse 18, it says, there's a little footnote that says Red Sea or Sea of Reeds. Possibly Sea of Reeds. And a lot of people will claim here that there's a mistranslation. That at some point, they mistranslated it. It never meant Red Sea, it meant Sea of Reeds, which would be a large sea, but not deep, that the Israelites would be able to cross through much more easily than the Red Sea. The Red Sea is big. If you're not familiar with how big the Red Sea is, just go look at any map. It's huge. You're not going to walk across the Red Sea or through the Red Sea without something pretty crazy happening. So the argument that if this is properly translated as Reed Sea, the Reed Sea is shallower and would allow the Hebrews to pass through with little problem. But if that's the explanation, then we got a new miracle that we have to talk about. And I'll come back to that in just a second. The Israelites, the Hebrews, now have left Egypt. They're going toward the sea. Whatever sea we're going toward, Red Sea, Reed Sea, we're going that way. And Pharaoh changes his mind. And he sends the army after the Israelites. At this point, the Israelites are trapped between the sea and the Egyptian army closing in on them. There's no place to go. They're trapped. They're panicking. So the Lord tells Moses to raise his staff. Raise his staff, and the sea in front of him will part. And they pass through, quote, on dry land. So now, let's go back to that Sea of Reeds, Red Sea argument. So if it's the Reed Sea, there's still a miracle here of a parting of a sea, because we're told that they walk through on dry land, right? They're not wading through a marshy area or anything like that. Then the Egyptians follow the Israelites, but the sea closes back in on them and they all drown. Now, if the sea is so shallow for the Israelites could walk through it, then why did the sea part for them so they could walk on dry land? And how did this shallow sea then drown all the Egyptians as they pursued? Just some things to think about. So there's your new miracle, if our translation is Reed Sea as opposed to Red Sea. So the Israelites are now free. They're on the other side of the Red Sea. They're free from slavery in Egypt. Hooray! Everything is great now, right? No. Now they have to wander the desert for 40 years. But at least they're content as they wander through the desert, right? They're free from the slavery of Egypt, so they're content. Like, yeah, it's a desert, it's dry, it's sandy, but, at least we are not with the Egyptians. No, they complain the whole time. 40 years of complaining. Parents, your kids have only complained for like 12 or 13 years, right? They complain the whole time. God gives them manna to eat, and the manna is not enough. You're in a stark, desolate desert. There's nothing there, and God miraculously provides you food. You're like, yeah, that's not good enough. And then God says, okay, here's some quail. Like, we don't have any barbecue sauce for the quail. Okay, that's not actually in Exodus, but anyway. The quail part is, he gives them quail. They keep complaining. Moses could have had anything he wanted in his life. Anything. He was the son of an Egyptian princess. Yes, he was a Hebrew, but he was royalty. And then he set aside his privilege to do what God needed him to do. What about us? What about us? We live in the United States of America, one of the greatest countries on earth today, one of the wealthiest countries on earth today. I know that doesn't mean that we're all personally wealthy, but do you realize that you are part of the wealthiest 1% of the world, the wealthiest 1% of the world if you make more than $34,000 a year? Of course, in the United States, that takes close to $6 million if you want to be in the top 1% of wage earners. But around the world, if you make more than $34,000 a year, you're in the top 1%. Most of us here are white. And if we don't realize how much of a privilege that is, we're not paying attention. Are we willing to set aside any of our privilege for God's glory? Moses gave up everything to serve his Lord. Everything. He was royalty. He was free. He gave that up. He endured slavery to serve God, to give God the glory. Moses gave up everything to serve his Lord. What are we willing to give up? Will we give up money? Will we give up comfort? Whenever I think of that one, I always think of just the Mexico trip, right? It's just really awkward to put toilet paper in the garbage can next to you. It's just a comfort thing. But it's really weird. Anybody else think that's weird? We're so used to, you can't drink the tap water. I mean, when we go there, we stay in a nice hotel. We're very comfortable. But there's just that little tiny bit of comfort that you have here. Are we willing to give up money? Are we willing to give up comfort? Are we willing to give up power for God's glory? Now, we might not have to give up a lot for God's glory, but it does mean putting God first in our lives. And for us today, the first step in that process is having Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Jesus Christ, God himself, came down from heaven and lived with us, fully God, fully human. And he did that so we could have our sins forgiven. He went willingly to the cross. He shed his blood. He died so that we could be reconciled back to our loving Creator, from whom we have been separated because of our sin. What did the Israelites do to be saved that first Passover? They had to sacrifice a lamb and cover their doorframe in the blood of that lamb. Who is Jesus? Jesus is that lamb who was sacrificed so that when you are covered in the blood of the lamb, death, eternal death, will pass over you and you will be with your loving God forever. Jesus made that sacrifice willingly for us. His sacrifice forgives our sin if we believe in him. The Apostle Paul reminds us, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You will be saved.